Inside the quiet, candlelit halls of Adelaide Cottage, everything changed in an instant. Kate, pale and trembling, clutched a letter in her hands. Her knees buckled. William caught her just before she hit the floor. "It's worse than we thought," she whispered, barely audible. Aides rushed in. Medical staff followed, but nothing could stop the moment the future Queen of England collapsed in her husband's arms, shattering the royal illusion of control. What devastating news did she receive? Why was William completely blindsided? This wasn't just a health crisis, it was a royal reckoning. Stay with us. This story is far from over. The moment that shook the palace. It was a quiet afternoon inside Adelaide Cottage. The scent of fresh flowers drifted through the drawing room as Kate sat by the window, her eyes fixed on the garden but her mind elsewhere. Then came the moment that would change everything. Her doctor's voice, calm but final, delivered the words, "It's cancer." In that instant, the world spun. Her hands trembled, her breath caught, and the Duchess of Cambridge, a woman known for her composure, visibly faltered. She clutched the armrest. Her face went pale. A sudden wave of dizziness overtook her. This wasn't just news. This was a bombshell. Prince William, just steps away, froze. For a moment, he wasn't the future king. He was just a husband, watching the love of his life unravel before him. "We'll get through this," he whispered, but his voice cracked. He reached for her, pulling her into a tight embrace. The room fell into a tense silence. Love was there, raw and real, but so was fear. William's hands shook. No one had prepared him for this kind of pain. Palace medical staff were summoned in seconds. Aides rushed to close the doors, pulling thick curtains to shield the scene from onlookers. Privacy, always a royal priority, now became a desperate necessity. The staff moved quietly, but urgently. Tension filled every corner of the cottage. The outside world would know nothing. For now, behind the scenes, the palace was holding its breath. The contrast between public silence and private chaos was stark. Cameras still flashed outside, assuming the Cambridges were living a calm royal life. But inside was heartbreak. Inside was confusion. The royal code of discretion kept the truth hidden, but it couldn't protect them from the pain. This was a battle unfolding away from the public eye. And as the world remained unaware of the storm inside Adelaide Cottage, we rewind the clock, back to the beginning of a love story that would soon be tested like never before. A love story, tested by fate. It all started at St. Andrews University. Kate was the girl next door, William the prince trying to be just another student. In the beginning, it was all casual. They were friends first, laughing over library coffee breaks, bumping into each other at parties. But even then, something unspoken lingered between them. "He made me laugh," Kate once said, "and he was just normal." Their friendship soon bloomed into love, but it wasn't a straight path. They broke up in 2007, shocking the public. But behind the headlines, the truth was simple. They needed space. They were young, under pressure, and figuring themselves out. "We were finding our own way," William explained later. And somehow, that time apart made them stronger. When William proposed in Kenya in 2010, it wasn't just romantic. It was symbolic. He gave Kate his mother's ring, Princess Diana's sapphire. A legacy, a promise. "It's my way of keeping her close," William said. That moment, set against the African sunset, sealed their bond forever. It wasn't about royalty. It was about love. Kate's transformation into a royal wasn't just about tiaras and titles. She had to learn protocols, carry the expectations of a nation, and still be herself. She never lost who she was, a friend shared. And William? He stood by her side through it all. Their relationship, built on friendship and tested by time, now faced its biggest challenge yet. But nothing could have prepared them for what came next, a diagnosis that would turn their world upside down. A diagnosis in the dark. It began like any other hospital visit, a follow-up after a planned surgery. Nothing alarming at first, but when doctors reviewed the results, their expressions changed. There was something there, something unexpected. And just like that, a routine check became a turning point. "We need to run more tests," they said. Kate's heart sank. The diagnosis came privately. It was cancer. A word that echoed through their minds like thunder. They didn't tell anyone at first. Not the public, not even extended family. It was too fresh, too painful. "We needed time to understand it ourselves," William reportedly said. They withdrew quietly from the spotlight, trying to come to terms with their new reality. As Kate stepped away from public duties, rumors began to swirl. Where was she? Why hadn't she been seen? The speculation turned wild. But behind palace doors, Kate was undergoing treatment. Each day brought new challenges: pain, fear, and uncertainty. Yet she stayed silent, because this was her journey, and she wasn't ready to share it. Not yet. Balancing duty with privacy became a delicate dance. Kate wanted to protect her children, her family, her peace. The pressure was immense, but the Cambridges stood firm. They knew the world would eventually know the truth, but they wanted to reveal it on their own terms, and that moment would come. Just not yet. But how did William cope with this invisible storm? A prince, a husband, a father facing a battle he couldn't control. Let's find out. A diagnosis in the dark. It began like any other day, a standard checkup, nothing alarming. Kate had been feeling off, tired more than usual, a little out of breath at times, but no one thought much of it. The palace, accustomed to the demands of royal life, chalked it up to stress. But behind the private doors of the clinic, doctors saw something else, something they couldn't ignore. After her abdominal surgery, what was supposed to be a routine recovery turned into weeks of uncertainty. It was during further testing that the shadow appeared, a medical insider would later whisper. It was unexpected, not because royals are immune to illness, but because no one saw it coming. Not like this. And certainly not to her, the woman who had become the public's steady hand of grace. Kate and William chose silence. For months, nothing was said. The palace held its breath. Kate disappeared from view. Paparazzi speculated wildly. Headlines screamed with rumors. Was it cosmetic surgery? Was she hiding from the spotlight? The truth was far heavier. "We weren't hiding," a close friend later said. "We were just trying to understand what was happening." It wasn't just about health. It was about how to live with a new truth. The emotional toll was enormous. Kate, a woman known for poise, was suddenly a patient. A mother faced with explaining the unexplainable to her children. And through it all, she had to wear silence like a second skin. She cried often in those early days, one aide admitted, but not because she was scared for herself. She was scared for the people she loved. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was protection. Sometimes strength is being quiet while everything inside you screams. But Kate wasn't alone in this. Right beside her, William was living through the same nightmare, balancing duty and heartbreak, trying to stay strong when everything around him was falling apart. What kind of prince do you become when your crown weighs less than your wife's pain? William Prince or protector? The day William heard the word cancer, He didn't respond like a royal. He responded like a husband. He squeezed Kate's hand so tight she winced. "We'll face it together," he said, barely above a whisper. But deep inside, the future King of England was crumbling. Not because he couldn't handle the pressure, but because this wasn't about the crown. This was about the woman he loved. In the weeks that followed, William vanished from several key royal events. At first, the palace offered vague explanations, scheduling conflicts, private commitments. But those closest to the couple knew the truth. William wasn't sleeping. He wasn't eating properly. He looked thinner every time we saw him, one family friend noted. Behind closed doors, he was holding her hand through chemo sessions, making her soup, reading bedtime stories when she couldn't. And the weight of it all showed. Even the staff noticed. "He wasn't Prince William anymore," one said. "He was just Will, a husband trying to keep it together." There were nights he cried, not in front of Kate, but in the privacy of his own room after the children had gone to sleep. He didn't want her to see him break. Still, in public, he was steady, calm. His speeches were brief, but carried something new: vulnerability, a softness that hadn't been there before. One line struck a chord with millions. Sometimes the people who hold you up need to be held too. In that moment, he wasn't just a prince. He was every man who's ever had to be brave for someone else. He wore the weight of the world and still smiled for his children. But what about those children? George, Charlotte, and Louis, young, innocent, and still learning what pain even means. How do you explain cancer to a child without breaking their heart? How do you let them live normally when nothing is normal anymore? Behind palace walls, from the outside, their lives looked the same: school runs, piano lessons, bedtime stories. But inside Adelaide Cottage, everything had changed. George had started asking questions. Charlotte became clingier. Louis, though too young to understand the word illness, sensed that something was off. Kids know. They always do. Kate and William tried their best to keep it simple. They spoke in soft tones, used words like medicine and rest. But Charlotte caught on quickly. "Mummy's tired again?" she would ask. And Kate would smile and nod, even on days when she could barely lift her head. "We were honest, but gentle," William later shared. They didn't need all the details. They just needed to feel safe. To protect their childhood, the couple made subtle changes. More time at home, fewer formal dinners. Even palace staff were briefed. Let them be kids. Storytime became sacred. Baking cookies turned into a ritual. And on days when Kate felt strong enough, she'd sit in the garden with them, pretending things were normal, because sometimes pretending was the only way to hold on. Still, children sense emotion even when words fail. George would give his mother longer hugs. Charlotte wrote her little notes and left them on her nightstand. Louis, in his own way, would bring her stuffed animals and whisper, "Mummy's better soon." These moments, small as they were, became the family's lifeline. Proof that love speaks loudest when everything else falls quiet. They didn't need to understand everything. They just needed to know she was still theirs. Outside, the world was asking questions. Where is Kate? What's wrong? The press grew louder. The public grew restless. But the palace, silent. For weeks, nothing. Why? Because inside those gates, a storm was raging, and they had to hold it together before facing the world. The silent storm. As Kate remained hidden from public view, the outside world was spinning with noise. Speculation erupted like wildfire. Was she ill, depressed, or stepping back from royal duties altogether? Social media became a storm of conspiracy theories, but inside the palace walls, one thing ruled above all: silence. The decision to say nothing wasn't easy. The palace communications team held emergency meetings daily. Some aides pushed for a statement, others insisted on privacy. In the end, the family made the call. Protect Kate's space, even if it meant feeding the flames. "We understood the noise," said a senior aide, "but we chose compassion over control." Behind the scenes, the palace worked overtime. Every press request was delicately handled. Every staffer was reminded. No leaks. The Middletons were brought into the fold, tight-lipped, supportive, and fiercely loyal. They became a firewall of protection around Kate. William coordinated messaging closely. He knew one wrong move could shatter everything, but silence came with a cost. Every quiet day deepened the mystery. "Where is Kate?" trended globally. Still, the palace stayed the course. Why? Because Kate wasn't ready. And when she finally spoke, it would be her voice, unfiltered, unforced, and from the heart. The royal family had to hold their line until then. A storm of whispers was better than breaking her spirit with rushed headlines. Sometimes silence isn't hiding, it's healing. And then, it happened. One single video, just a few minutes long, but it stopped the world in its tracks. No fanfare, no throne, just a woman, a camera, and a message that would change everything. The announcement that shattered hearts. She sat alone on a bench. No makeup, no fanfare, just Kate, raw and real. When the video dropped, the world stopped. "I have been diagnosed with cancer," she said, her voice soft but steady. That single line hit like thunder. No one was prepared, not even the millions who had speculated for weeks. She called it preventative chemotherapy, explained how the diagnosis came after major surgery. She thanked the doctors, the nurses, her family, but most of all, she asked for time, for space, for understanding. "We hope you'll respect our need for privacy while I complete my treatment," she said, holding back tears. Why did she choose to speak alone? Because this was her journey, her story. And after months of others speaking for her or about her, Kate took the narrative back. The palace had waited because she needed to find her voice. And when she did, it echoed around the world. Headlines turned from scandal to support. People from every corner of the globe sent messages. Mothers in chemotherapy clinics cried watching her. Cancer survivors saw themselves in her words, her strength, her fear, her humanity. Kate didn't just give an update. She gave people something to hold on to. Proof that vulnerability could be regal too. In that moment, she wasn't just a princess. She was every woman fighting to stay strong. But this wasn't the only storm shaking the monarchy. Behind the scenes, another diagnosis had shaken the royal core. Because while Kate was battling in silence, Zoe was the king. 2 blows, 1 family, and a prince caught in the middle. King Charles and the double blow. When King Charles revealed his own cancer diagnosis, it sent shockwaves through the monarchy. The country had barely absorbed Kate's news when they were faced with a second heartbreak. But this time, the crisis wasn't just medical. It was dynastic. 2 pillars of the family down. Who would hold the fort? For William, it was too much. His father was ill. His wife was fighting. His children needed him. And the crown, suddenly, it felt heavier than ever. "He became the glue holding everyone together," said a close source. But he was breaking inside too. Public duties took a backseat. William started declining more events, stepping in only when absolutely necessary. Behind palace gates, father and son grew closer than ever. There were long conversations by the fireplace, walks in the Balmoral Gardens where words weren't needed, just presence. Charles, ever the monarch, tried to reassure his son, but even he couldn't hide the worry in his eyes. 2 generations, 1 battle. And through it all, William stood tall. Not for the cameras, but for the people he loved. He was no longer just the heir. He was a caretaker, a father, a husband, and a son, trying to carry a legacy while holding his family together. The crown wasn't just a duty now, it was a burden of love. Sometimes the next king isn't born in palaces, but in moments of pain. But while duty and destiny loomed heavy on the shoulders of men, behind closed doors, a different kind of battle was unfolding. One that wasn't about titles or thrones, but about survival. Let's step into Kate's quiet war, a journey of strength, struggle, and soul. Support Network. While the spotlight stayed on Kate and William, behind the scenes, a quiet army was holding everything together. Family, friends, loyal aides. These weren't the faces you saw in magazines or official photos, but without them, the royal foundation might have cracked completely. Carol and Michael Middleton were the first line of defense. Calm, grounded, and fiercely private, they stepped in without hesitation. Carol took over school pickups, helped with meals, and made sure the children's world stayed steady. "Mom is our rock," Kate has said before, and never had that been more true than now. Their Buckleberry home became a refuge when palace life became too heavy. Pippa and James Middleton, Kate's siblings, brought emotional strength. They visited quietly, offering laughter when it was most needed, and silence when it was most healing. They didn't try to fix anything, a palace insider revealed. They just showed up, and that meant everything. The siblings became a protective shield, not just for Kate, but for William, too. Inside the palace, longtime aides like Natasha Archer worked behind the curtain to keep royal life moving smoothly. Domestic staff handled the everyday burdens, grocery runs, scheduling, the smallest of details, all so that Kate could focus on healing. These people didn't just serve the crown, they served her. And the world responded. Letters poured in from every corner, messages from strangers, cancer survivors, mothers, children, some handwritten, some from celebrities, all with the same message: we're with you. It wasn't just support, it was a movement. One woman's story had united a world. Behind every strong woman is a village that refuses to let her fall. And while Kate rested and fought in private, William had to face the public. He couldn't hide, couldn't break. But something inside him changed, and when he finally spoke, people listened with their hearts. William's public resilience. In the past, William's speeches were formal, measured, sometimes distant. But during this crisis, something shifted. His words came from somewhere deeper, from pain, from love, from our truth. He didn't need to say much. A few honest sentences cut through the noise. At a youth center in London, weeks after Kate's video, William addressed the crowd. "We all carry things no one can see," he said. "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is keep going." It wasn't just a line. It was his life. His voice cracked slightly, and in that crack, the world saw his soul. His tone had softened. There was warmth, even vulnerability. At a charity event for cancer research, he said, "I've seen strength in its purest form, up close at home. It's something I'll never forget." People didn't just applaud, they felt it. This wasn't a prince making a speech. This was a man, wounded but walking forward. The press began to shift. Instead of analyzing his posture or rehearsed gestures, they quoted his words. His presence became more human, less polished, and in doing so, he redefined what strength looked like in a royal figure. Quiet resilience, emotional honesty, steady leadership wrapped in love. Even his father noticed. "You've grown into your own," Charles reportedly told him during a private conversation. And he had. Because through pain, William found purpose, not in a crown, but in connection. He didn't speak often, but when he did, The whole world leaned in. And then, a quiet miracle. After months of uncertainty, Kate appeared. The woman who had vanished returned. And the moment she stepped back into public view, it wasn't just a royal reappearance. It was a symbol of survival. The graceful return. It started small. A visit to Southport to meet with cancer support volunteers. No grand entrance, no press conference, just Kate, smiling, present, and unmistakably changed. The cameras captured it. Her frame was slimmer, her movements slower, but her eyes brighter than ever. She had returned, not just physically, but emotionally. Soon after, she made a deeply symbolic appearance at the Royal Marsden Hospital. It was personal, not just because of her own experience with cancer, but because she'd long been a patron of the hospital. "I now understand what bravery really looks like," she told a patient quietly. The moment was brief, but it meant everything. Then came the Christmas Day walk at Sandringham, a tradition. But this time, it was a triumph. Dressed in deep green, holding Charlotte's hand, she greeted well-wishers with gratitude and grace. People cried, applauded. Some simply stood in silence as she passed. She didn't need to say a word. Her presence said it all. And now her future projects reflect her journey. A new focus on early diagnosis, more involvement in health charities. "This experience has given me purpose," she recently told her team. She's using her pain to help others. And by doing so, she's not just reclaiming her public role. She's reshaping it. She didn't come back as the woman she was. She came back as the warrior she became. But what does this all mean? For her, for William, for the monarchy? The story isn't ending. It's evolving. And what lies ahead might be the greatest chapter yet. What lies ahead for the royal couple? The life Kate and William once planned has changed. Forever. There's no going back to before. But in its place stands something even stronger. A bond reforged in fire. They don't just rule side by side now. They live side by side, in a deeper, unshakable way. Kate's experience is already reshaping her role. She's no longer just the perfect duchess or glamorous princess. She's an advocate, a survivor, a symbol of strength. And the public sees it. Trust has deepened. Empathy has grown. She's not performing royalty. She's living it, with meaning. William, too, is evolving. The nation saw a future king who could feel, who could hurt, and still lead. That emotional transparency has modernized the monarchy more than any PR strategy ever could. He's never been more ready, one royal insider said, because he knows now that leadership isn't about perfection, it's about heart. As a couple, they're closer than ever, not in the flashy, tabloid way, but in the quiet way you only earn through hardship. Their shared journey has written a new love story, one that no tiara, no throne, no title could ever define. Their future? It's still royal, still full of duty, but now it's infused with humanity. And for a monarchy that's always walked the tightrope between tradition and relevance, this could be the turning point. They walked through fire, separately together, and came out stronger than ever. As Kate regains strength and William stands unwavering at her side, the world watches, not for pageantry, but for humanity. The palace, once a symbol of perfection, now reflects resilience. Their love has been tested, their family shaken, and yet they endure. What does this mean for the monarchy's future? Can a couple, once defined by duty, now lead with vulnerability and truth? The silence is breaking. The story is evolving. And what comes next may just redefine what it means to wear the crown. Don't blink, because the next chapter might change everything.